So anyone else expected Prashant?
Yes, sir. Rakesh, Ujjwala.
Should we wait?
We wait for 2 minutes, sir.
Okay. With the MAs, if they don't turn up, I'm just taking a class and putting it on the, I'm just giving a lecture and putting it on YouTube. Um, uh, Everybody is very confident of Usman University passing them. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
It only helps for our UG, sir. After PG, I mean, if we are in our MA, then
I don't know. The education system needs to be, I think it basically needs to be revamped properly, because that new education policy that has come out under Kasturi Rangan is not a very well thought out, it's not an extremely intelligent way of doing things. So, okay, I think we can start off because we have 2 people. And if more come, good. Otherwise, also good. Okay. Uh, so we'll be doing Aristotle today. I hope I saw you circulate that thing that Kautilya, Saptanga, Mandala, and Buddha can be taken from my lectures. Okay. I hope people are doing that from my MA lectures. Uh, so we'll start with Aristotle today. Uh, Aristotle was born in the Greek province of Stagira. There is a common misconception that he was an Athenian. He was not an Athenian. Uh, he was born in Stagira, which is one of the many different polis in ancient Greece. And he was also famous for one more reason, which is that he was teacher to Alexander the Great, who was the son of the king of Macedonia. Macedonia is another province, like Athens. And Aristotle was chosen specifically to impart education to Alexander the Great. Uh, and Alexander is known more for his military achievements rather than his intellectual achievements. So we do not really know the extent of influence that was there on Alexander. Uh, as far as Aristotle is concerned, how much was he influenced by Aristotle? We have no idea. In fact, I strongly believe that he hardly was influenced by him, because once we come down to one specific section, I'll return to this point. about what what Aristotle has to say about how man becomes political. When we come to that section, I'll talk about how there is probably no influence of Aristotle on Alexander. So it's just a fact for which has some historical curiosity and nothing else to talk about. Despite the negative feelings that Pericles uh, expressed in his famous oration after the defeat of the Athenians to the Spartans, uh, one has to remember that when it came to education, it was Athens which was always at the forefront. Okay, uh, and it's not just, of course, we. I'm not talking about the Milesians, those who belong to Miletus. That was much earlier, but later people are all people who have had their education in Athens, whether it is in literature, whether it is people like Sophocles, or if it is uh, what's his name, Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. Uh, and if you look at various different philosophers, you will find that all these people had their education, and Socrates himself, the great Socrates, uh, there were these people had their education in Athens. So Athens was the seat of learning. Uh, that goes. It's like you know what Nalanda, Pataliputra, and Takshasila were to the ancient Indians. Though Takshasila is now in present day Pakistan, uh, it is, but in those days there was no Pakistan. So these were the great centers of education: Nalanda, uh, Takshasila, and Pataliputra. Pataliputra is relatively newer. Anyway, so Athens was the center of education, and Aristotle was somebody who was full of curiosity. He wanted to learn new things, and therefore he was encouraged by his father to go to Athens for his education. He came to Athens, or rather went to Athens for his education, and enrolled himself in Plato's academy. Okay, the name academy was at that time a proper noun. It was an institution of learning set up by Plato to impart education. And academy is now the source of all words such as academics, academia, all those. It is the source of those words. Academy, generically speaking, is something which should be understood as a place where education is imparted. And so Plato called his institution the academy. And Plato was, like I told you yesterday, or whenever we met last, he was a great educationist. He was the first great philosopher to, emphasize the necessity for good education. So Plato just didn't talk. He wanted to convert his ideas into reality, and hence set up the academy and started imparting education uh, to various people in Athens. Uh, Aristotle's education was mostly in the academy itself, but he differed considerably with his teacher Plato. Okay, one would have thought that if he was uh, Plato's student, then he should be positively influenced by Plato. But it isn't so. Like, for example, if you ask me, uh, what were or who were, sorry, who were the people who inspired me to take up academics? Like all people at one time, even I saw dreams of writing the civil service examination, but I gave it up when I came across some teachers. The first and foremost among them is Professor Sudipto Kaviraj. Uh, he's an amazing scholar. He still teaches. He's now in Colombia, of course. Uh, and there they don't have an age of retirement. So he was one person who influenced me and very, very positively. Then uh, Madam Gurpreet Mahajan, another great scholar and somebody whose scholarship was so impressive that you thought you had to do something like this. And then there is Professor Sanjay Palshikar. He is now in the University of Hyderabad. But when I was doing my MA in Delhi, he was there on a lean vacancy. These three people had a positive influence on me. I learned a lot from them, and I had set myself a goal that I should at least reach their level, if not surpass them. That was a goal that I had set for myself. Uh, I don't know if I've reached their level. I certainly don't think I've surpassed anyone. But great teachers have a tendency to inspire students. Of course, you should have it in you to want to learn. Uh, but funnily, despite Plato's greatness, despite Plato's amazing scholarship, and it is documented that he was also a great teacher. Despite all that, you will see that Aristotle is someone who doesn't agree with Plato on most things in life. His most famous saying, that is very often quoted by a number of people, is, much as I love Plato, I love truth more. And please remember, truth has to be written with a capital T here, because when you look at truth with a small t, then it is the opposite of a lie. Okay, a lie or a misrepresentation. A truth is a proper representation, an appropriate or correct representation. If you write it with a small t, if I say, tell me the truth, are you listening to me? And you say, no, I am not listening to you. That is truth with small t. But when you say truth with a capital T, then it becomes the cause of all causes. It becomes that particular principle that runs the world. If you have heard my lectures on YouTube about Buddha, the truth that Buddha spoke about was dukkha. Dukkha gets translated as suffering, but it is not really suffering. Uh, it is more like sadness, it is more like sorrow, which leads to suffering. So, suffering is not the direct translation, it is an effect of dukkha. Okay, so he talked about dukkha as the principle that drives the world. Okay, and funnily enough, at, when I keep saying that T with capital truth with a capital T is very important. We will, as we go forward with Aristotle, we will realize that he has something in common with the Buddha. I won't talk about it now. We'll talk about it when it comes up. And again, that truth with a capital T will tell you why there is no great influence of Aristotle on Alexander. Okay, that'll tell you why there isn't any influence at all. Uh, One of the greatest paintings of all time by the Renaissance painter Raphael. Okay, please pronounce that as Raphael. Okay, Americans, for some strange reason, have converted that pronunciation into Raphael. It is not Raphael, it is Raphael. And the French have made it Rafale, uh, which is also not the correct pronunciation. The correct pronunciation is Raphael. Raphael is the one of the great painters, artists of the Renaissance, though not in the same league as Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was something else, but he was certainly in the league of people like Michelangelo, or it should be pronounced Michele Angelo if it take the Italian pronunciation, but it's just become Michael, even though it's written Michel. Uh, anyway, so Raphael uh, was a very famous painter of the Renaissance, and he painted this work, which is still there for people to see in Rome. I think in the Museum of the Vatican, uh, you can see this particular painting. And in this painting, you have two people standing back to back, kind of stuff. And one is looking up at the skies. It's a starry sky, a very starry sky. Is looking up at that one person. The other person who's behind him is looking down at the ground. And the ground is not necessarily good, as in it doesn't have a garden. It's not something which shows flowers. It's not something that shows grass. It's just ground. So this is the painting, and this is supposed to be the depiction of Plato and of Aristotle. Plato was a stargazer. Stargazers are also called dreamers, according to the interpretation of this particular painting of Raphael's. People say that Plato was a stargazer, a dreamer, whereas Aristotle was down to earth. And that is the significant difference between the two, one being a dreamer and therefore an idealist, the other being down to earth and therefore a realist. This is not an accurate interpretation of either Plato or Aristotle. There is a thing called an artist's license. Okay. Uh, a painter can choose to depict reality the way he sees it. Okay. He can choose to depict it the way he sees it. So there is an artistic license that is given to painters to express themselves. The same thing is true of poets. Okay, so uh, poets, in order to write as per meter and as per rhyme, used to write the past of bring as brung and brang. Okay, whereas it should be brought. But if it had to rhyme with something, then they would write it as brang or brung. That is again artist license, or in this case, it's called poetic license to coin new words. But when it comes to philosophy, you can coin new words, but you have to be very careful about what kind of meanings you attribute to those new coinages. And you have to consistently stick with that particular uh, coinage of yours. Okay, so if you look at a book which I read when I was your age, uh, a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It had nothing to do with motorcycle maintenance. It was a book basically about philosophy. Zen is dhyana for in Japanese. In Sanskrit, it is dhyana. In Chinese, it is Chan. For the Japanese and the Koreans, it is Zen, Dhyana. It is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And that Robert Pirsig, who wrote that book, basically makes a claim wherein he says a romantic understanding of a motorcycle is understanding it superficially, which is you will understand it as, okay, it's got two tires on which it runs, it's got an engine that somehow propels it forward, and it has a handlebar that you use to turn it. It has a light that you switch on when it is dark. So you have all this kind of a description for him is what he calls romantic understanding, which for him is a superficial understanding. As opposed to this, you have what he calls a philosophical understanding. And the philosophical understanding, or sometimes he uses even scientific understanding. Okay. And then you will say, how does the motorcycle move on its own? So then you'll have to talk about fuel. You'll have to say fuel goes into the engine, into the cylinder or the barrel. There it is ignited. And when it is ignited, it generates heat. And heat is then converted into energy and used to propel the motorcycle forward. That is as a scientific or philosophical understanding, as opposed to, and that's a deep understanding. What I've given you, of course, is not a deep understanding. You can have 2 strokes, 4 strokes, all kinds of things. But where you understand the actual engineering, the working of each and every part of the motorcycle. That is a comprehensive understanding which is based in some kind of scientificity or philosophical philosophy. And the romantic is just something which is superficial. Well, he sticks to that uh, definition of his throughout, so it's okay. But if you look at philosophy, philosophy will not accept romantic in that particular way. Okay, neither will it understand as romance, which is people falling in love. And if you watch our films, dancing together with some 25,000 people doing a drill behind them, and especially in Telugu movies. And so uh, we say that is romance. That is also not romance. Romantic understanding in philosophical terms, this you'll understand when we come to Rousseau. It is a very, very pessimistic, okay? It is an extremely pessimistic view of modern capitalist society. That's its technical understanding. So one has to be very careful with how we use these words, romantic understanding. And so this idea that Plato is a dreamer and therefore an idealist, as in one who's stargazing, you can never reach the stars. Idealism as that elusive thing, and uh, Aristotle as the realist, where things are not elusive. These things don't get applied either to Plato or to Aristotle. Okay, Plato is not a dreamer. He's not an idealist, as I told you when we were doing idealism, when he says the ideal is the real. He's not using it in the uh, post Second World War sense of ideal versus real. Okay, the realists like Hans Morgenthau, you must have studied in your international relations. Hans Morgenthau, Reinhold Niebuhr, E.H. Carr, they called themselves realists, and they believed that human beings cannot live peacefully together. And if you think that they can live peacefully together, you were called an idealist. That was what was given as a title in a pejorative or a negative way to Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, who believed that war needn't exist. Okay, and in fact, Bertrand Russell even appeared in a Hindi film, of all things, starring Rajendra Kumar. In this, the name of this film is Aman, A-M-A-N. Aman is peace. Okay, it basically means peace. And in this, you see Rajendra Kumar actually interviews Bertrand Russell for about 5 minutes. It's actually there in the film. If you get to see it, see it. It's a very interesting film, very, very interesting, very well made. Anyway, so Bertrand Russell was called an idealist, as was Mahatma Gandhi, because Mahatma Gandhi said non-violence, but Mahatma Gandhi proved that we can get independence without taking recourse to violence. So where is that as the opposite of realism? It's the international relations discourse, which came into being during the interwar period, starting with Edward Carr, C-A-R-R, E.H. Carr, and Reinhold, R-E-I-N-H-O-L-D, Reinhold Naibur, Neibuhr, Reinhold Niebuhr. These two people in the interwar period talked about realism as the opposite of idealism, and they are also critical of Mahatma Gandhi, and they think he's some kind of a stupid fellow. And there is also an extended dialogue between the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber and Mahatma Gandhi, where Buber wanted support for the state of Israel to be created in the Palestinian region, and Mahatma Gandhi refused to support it. He said, You are asking for an Israel based on your books, the Talmud and the Torah, which were written so many centuries ago. On the basis of that, you are asking for the creation of an Israel there, whereas there are already Palestinians there. He called them Musalmans. He didn't call them Muslims. He said the Musalmans are there. You cannot ask them to get out of that place. So he said, I will not give support. And he said, if I support your movement, what message am I sending to my own country's Musalmans who are fighting the war? Not actually a war, but they were participating in this uh, peaceful movement for independence. They are also fighting for independence side by side with Hindus. What message am I sending to them if I say that Israel can be created? He said, no, I don't support it. Okay. And Gandhi, being Gandhi, he said, uh, when what's his name? Martin Buber said, but do you support the killings of Jews by Hitler? He said, no. And if you don't want Hitler to kill you, what you should do is you should go jump from a mountain. Don't give him the satisfaction of killing you. Go jump from a mountain, and you basically prove to him that you're not afraid of death, because death is going to come to you someday. So prove that you're not afraid of death, jump, and don't give him the satisfaction of killing you. And it's not empty words, mind you, because in 1921, I think, I hope I've got the year right, there was a Mopla rebellion in what is today Kerala, Moplah, Mopla rebellion, and it was about the Khilafat movement, because the Ottoman Empire had fallen. Otherwise, the Ottoman Empire was there in Turkey till that particular time. So Khilafat comes from Khalifa, who is the head of the Islamic uh, government. So these people were fighting against the British because they were also fighting. The British were also trying to create Israel there, and they were fighting Turkey. Now, at that particular time, when the Mopla rebellion happened, these people, some of them went and massacred Hindus, many Hindus. It was an arbitrary massacre. And at that particular time, a lot of people, including Ambedkar, told Gandhi, what are you doing? These people are innocent people are being slaughtered. So he said, just remember one thing. If the Hindus turn against the Muslims, then you fracture the freedom movement. I don't want the freedom movement to be fractured. If some Hindus die for the sake of the maintenance of the unity between Hindus and Muslims, so be it. Let them die. Then somebody asked him, what if they massacre all the Hindus? Then he said, okay, if it is fated that all Hindus should die and Hinduism should become extinct, and a new form of life and new religion or new whatever has to come into being on because of the death and extinction of Hinduism, so be it. But Hindus will not go and massacre Muslims. So during the Mopla rebellion, he refused to allow Hindus to go and fight the Muslims. So it's not as if he talked empty rubbish. Everybody knows that. Uh, so idealism, therefore, is not the opposite of realism. Ramana Maharshi, I don't know if you've heard of him, is a great man. And he had this to say about Gandhi. He said, the greatness of this man, Gandhi, and the reason why you can actually call him Mahatma is because he does what he believes is the right thing to do. He does not worry about the result. If the result is as per his expectation, it is good. Even if the result is not as per his expectation, then he still is not a disappointed man. He will still not change his view about truth with a capital T. So Chauri Chaura, 1922, which is when policemen were burnt in the police station, what did Gandhi do? He suspended the national movement. He said, if we are going to get independence over the dead bodies of people, then such an independence is not independence at all. So he was somebody who stuck to his principles. Today, it's an unfortunate thing that he is maligned. People say horrible things about Gandhi, especially the Ambedkarites. They abuse him. But Gandhi was probably the greatest man that the modern period has produced. And we, his own people, have disowned him. And we have proved Einstein completely wrong. Because Einstein, also a Jew, he basically said a day will come when generations of the future will come to know that a man called Mahatma Gandhi existed and he stood for the truth in a manner of bravery which defies the courage of violence. To be courageous and to be non-violent and to put your life online is something that only he has shown. That's what Einstein said. They said people will marvel about Gandhi, but what have we done? You know, the other day I was setting my books, so I sought the help of my uh, maid servants because I have a back problem. I asked for the help of my maid servant's son-in-law, and he saw that I have a number of books on Gandhi. He said, "Sir, you have so many books on Gandhi. How come you don't have a single book on Godse?" I said, "Nobody has yet written a book on Godse. Why don't you write one?" So that is where we have what we have done now. Anyway, I have digressed. But what I'm trying to tell you is that being ideal is not the opposite of real. Not at all. Okay? Plato was not a dreamer. Plato's academy was set up with the idea of taking and realizing the ideal state. taking forward the concept of the ideal state. So please remember that. And Aristotle is not a realist in the way in which we understand realism, so to speak. He's not a realist in that sense of the term at all. So this dreamer is give Raphael some artistic due, but don't take it seriously. Okay, it's not an accurate interpretation either of Plato or of Aristotle. Technically speaking, Plato's idealism is realism, so he should not be seen as a dreamer. Okay, and the word realist is also not to be used on Aristotle, since at that time the distinction between the ideal and the real did not exist in that time in the way in which it exists now. Uh, so it's a 20th century distinction. Please don't take it into the past. And as we move uh, forward, we will see that in quite a few ways, Aristotle too can be considered an idealist, though not in the Platonic sense of the term idealism. But there is idealism in Aristotle as well. People also use these other words to describe Aristotle, that he's earthy, he's practical, he's a pragmatist, and none of these words do justice to Aristotle. None of these words do justice to Aristotle because all of them have different meaning. An earthy person is one who is bothered about things that happen around us. Practical. Plato was not impractical. People thought, did anyone think that India achieving independence through non-violence was a practical thing? It wasn't. It wasn't at all. And pragmatist, except in the case of American philosophy, where there is a school of thought called pragmatist school, which has people like John Dewey and Richard Rorty. Except in that case, pragmatist has a negative view. A pragmatist is an opportunist, one who will do anything to reach the goal he wants to reach. And all these words again come down to this whole thing of realism or being a realistic person. Plato did not see himself as an unrealistic thinker because he saw his ideal republic as attainable. And that is why I told you he's extremely prescriptive of a number of things. He tells you what you should not listen to music, you should not read poetry. He says you should not read drama. And then he also tells you what to eat and what not to eat. I don't remember the dietary regimen that he basically talked about. So the question then is, what are the differences between Plato and Aristotle? Because obviously, when Aristotle made a statement that much as I love Plato, I love the truth more, that shows that there is a difference of opinion. So this I shall pick up in the next class. For some reason, this is going on, letting me go. But I'm a little tired. Because there was nobody in the previous class, and I wanted to finish something. I that I did for 1.5 hours, and this is almost 1 hour. So I'm a bit tired. So if you excuse me, we'll pick this up on Monday at 11 o'clock when I have your class. And we'll pick up the differences between Plato and Aristotle. Okay. So thank you very much for coming on Saturday. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, Ujwala. Thank you, Rakesh. Very kind of you people to come and help me progress. I have digressed a bit, but I did it deliberately. It's not like because we have to know some things about our own country. We have to know some things about our own people, our own leaders, okay, who are today unnecessarily being maligned. Today, people tell you that Modi is a great man because he wakes up at Brahma Muhurtam and prepares tea. That is the forward that is doing rounds. Those are all not signs of greatness. Uh, so we have reduced greatness to banalities. Anyway, so thank you very much. It has been very, very kind of you to come today. And I hope to see you on Monday so that we can get ahead and finish off this syllabus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.